The Quiet Life That Was Never Mine. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 6 years, I've lived alone in a small bungalow tucked into a peaceful suburban street. It's the kind of place where nothing unexpected ever happens. The neighbors wave politely, the lawns are trimmed with obsessive precision, and most nights, the loudest sound is the distant hum of someone's lawn sprinkler clicking in steady rhythm. It's predictable, and predictable is exactly how I like it. I work as a senior data analyst for a technology firm headquartered 3 states away. Most days, my world exists inside spreadsheets, algorithms, and logic trees. Numbers make sense. Patterns make sense. When something goes wrong, there's always a cause. And more importantly, there's always a solution. Life, I learned early on, does not work that way. My house isn't large. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a small kitchen with cabinets that still smell faintly of varnish when the sun hits them in the afternoon. But every inch of it is mine. I bought it when I was 28, after years of saving aggressively, skipping vacations, declining dinners out, and funneling every spare dollar into a down payment. It isn't fancy, but it's safe, and safety, for me, is everything. Because I didn't grow up safe. I grew up in a family where roles were assigned early and never changed. My younger brother, Ethan, was the center of gravity, the sun around which everything revolved. He was charming, expressive, creative, at least, that's what everyone said. He had an easy smile and an even easier way of convincing people that his future was just one breakthrough away. My parents adored him. They still do. He was 29 and still chasing dreams that never seemed to land anywhere real. His official title changed constantly: graphic designer, creative consultant, brand strategist, but the reality stayed the same. He didn't have stable income. He didn't have stability at all. But to my parents, none of that mattered. Because Ethan wasn't failing. He was finding himself. I, on the other hand, had already been found. Or rather, I'd been assigned. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need help, and the one they never worried about losing. Growing up, the differences between us weren't subtle. When Ethan turned 18, my parents bought him a car. Not a used car, not something practical, a brand new car. He needed it, they said, to explore opportunities, to find inspiration. When I turned 18, I got a bus schedule and a lecture about financial responsibility. When Ethan went to college for fine arts, my parents covered everything: tuition, housing, supplies. When I went to college for statistics, I worked 2 part-time jobs and took out loans to cover the gap. They called it character building. I called it survival. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I believe, even now, that they did. But their love wasn't equal. It was conditional. Ethan needed protection. I needed resilience. And resilience, they believed, didn't require comfort. It required pressure, so I learned to carry pressure. I graduated near the top of my class. When I told my parents, they smiled politely and said they were proud. Then my mother changed the subject to a poster Ethan had designed for a local event. When I got my first major promotion, they congratulated me briefly before asking if I could lend Ethan money for software he needed for a new project. When I bought my house, they came to see it once. My mother complimented the kitchen. My father asked about the property taxes. Ethan asked if he could use my Wi-Fi. That was the pattern. My achievements were milestones. His were miracles, and miracles, in their eyes, mattered more. At first, I told myself it didn't bother me. I was independent, successful, stable. I didn't need their approval. But that wasn't entirely true. Because a small part of me always hoped that one day, they'd see me, not as the reliable backup, not as the safety net, but as their daughter. Sunday dinners were the one constant. Every week, I drove 20 minutes to their house. The same driveway, the same creaky front door, the same smells drifting from the kitchen. Every week, I prepared myself, prepared to listen, prepared to nod, prepared to play my role. My father, Mark, was an accountant, a quiet man who believed in order. He balanced numbers for a living, but somehow never noticed how unbalanced our family was. My mother, Margaret, had been a nurse. She was warm, attentive, and endlessly patient. With Ethan, with me, she was efficient, practical, expectant. Dinner always followed the same rhythm. Questions about my job, asked more out of obligation than curiosity. Updates about Ethan's latest idea, delivered with enthusiasm. And somewhere in between, subtle reminders of my purpose. I was stable, which meant I was useful. That usefulness became more literal over time. When Ethan's car broke down, he borrowed mine. For 3 weeks, I took the bus. No one asked if it inconvenienced me. When he fell behind on rent, my parents called me. Not to ask, to inform. He just needs a little help. My mother said, I transferred the money. He never paid it back. He never mentioned it again. That was the unspoken contract. I provided stability. He consumed it, and my parents pretended that balance existed. Over time, my house became less mine. Boxes appeared in my spare room. Seasonal decorations, old equipment from Ethan's abandoned hobbies, a pottery wheel, DJ equipment, painting supplies. Each item represented a dream he'd started and left behind. Each item became my responsibility to store. I never agreed, but I never refused, because refusing meant confrontation, and confrontation meant guilt. So I adapted. I made space. I stayed quiet. Until the night everything changed. It was a Sunday like any other. The smell of pot roast filled the air as I walked inside. My mother greeted me with unusual excitement. Helen, she said brightly, Ethan has wonderful news. Wonderful news. Those words always meant trouble. I found Ethan in the living room, relaxed, confident, smiling like someone who had already won something. Big things are happening? He said. I nodded. I had heard that before. We sat down to dinner. Conversation flowed easily. Too easily. I should have recognized it. The calm before the storm. Halfway through the meal, my mother set down her fork and looked at me. Her expression was warm, certain, satisfied. We've come up with a solution, she said. A solution. My stomach tightened. She continued. Ethan will move into your house. Just like that, no question, no discussion. Just a decision. My house, my sanctuary, my life, reassigned. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. It makes perfect sense, she added. You have space. Ethan smiled. My father stayed silent. They had already agreed, already decided, already taken something that wasn't theirs. And in that moment, I realized something that would change everything. They never saw my life as mine. They saw it as theirs to use. And sitting there, watching them calmly dismantle the one place I had built for myself, I understood something else. If I didn't stop them now, I never would, because the next thing they would take wouldn't just be my house, it would be me. That night, as I sat alone in my living room, staring at the walls I had fought so hard to build, my phone lit up with a message from Ethan. He wasn't asking when he could move in. He was asking which side of the garage he should use. And that was the moment I realized. They had never planned to ask for permission, only to wait for my surrender. The invasion that had already begun. The message stayed on my screen long after the notification sound faded. Ethan, hey. Which side of the garage should I use? Left or right? Also, do you still have that big TV? Mine's kind of outdated. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because the question itself wasn't really a question. It was an assumption. A quiet declaration that the decision had already been made. That my silence wasn't resistance. It was compliance waiting to catch up. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and leaned back into the couch. My couch, my living room, my house. The words felt fragile now, like they could dissolve if I said them too loudly. For 4 years, this place had been the physical proof of my independence. Every wall represented a sacrifice. Every piece of furniture represented a choice I'd made without anyone else's approval. And now, suddenly, it wasn't mine anymore. Not in their minds. In their minds, it had become available space, available resources, available support. For Ethan, I stared at the doorway to the spare bedroom, the room my mother had already mentally reassigned to him. My office. The place where I worked 10-hour days. The place that paid for everything. They hadn't just asked for space. They had asked me to dismantle my life. And they had done it with complete confidence that I would agree. Because I always had before. That was the worst part. They weren't guessing. They were predicting. Predicting my obedience. Predicting my silence. Predicting me. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from my mother. We should bring Ethan's bed over this weekend. Your father can help move it. Not, can we? Not, would you mind? Just logistics. Just execution. Like they were scheduling a delivery. Like I was the address, not the owner. I picked up the phone and read the message 3 times. My chest tightened. Not with sadness, with something colder, something sharper. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt angry. Not explosive anger, not loud anger, quiet anger. The kind that doesn't burn. The kind that freezes. The kind that turns into decisions. I didn't reply to her either. I didn't reply to anyone. The next morning, I woke up early. Even though I hadn't slept much, sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin lines across the walls. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt temporary, like standing in a place that was already being taken from you. I walked into the kitchen and poured coffee. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I expected panic, confusion, desperation. Instead, I felt clarity. For years, I had reacted to their expectations, adjusted to their needs, adapted to their demands. I had lived defensively. But now, something was shifting. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to accommodate them. I was thinking about how to stop them. My phone buzzed again. A call. My mother. I watched it ring. Watched her name glow on the screen. I didn't answer. It rang until it stopped. Then came the voicemail notification. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen. Work emails waited for me. Deadlines, projects, responsibilities. Things that made sense. Things I could control. But my mind wasn't on any of it. It was on the spare bedroom. On the bed they were planning to bring. On the life they were planning to insert into mine. A second call came. This time from Ethan. I ignored that too. A third notification appeared. Another message. Mom, Helen, don't ignore us. We need to plan this properly. Need, not want. Need. The word sat heavy in my chest. Their need. Always their need. Never mine. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Walked down the hallway. Stopped at the spare bedroom door. Opened it. The room looked exactly as it always had. Desk, chair, bookshelf, laptop, everything in its place. Everything earned. I stepped inside slowly. Ran my hand across the desk surface. This room wasn't empty. It wasn't unused. It wasn't available. It was essential. Without this room, I couldn't work properly. Without my work, I couldn't afford this house. Without this housey, I would have nothing. And they knew that. They just didn't care. Because in their minds, Ethan's comfort outweighed my stability. I sat down in the chair and looked around. Memories filled the space. Late nights finishing projects. Early mornings preparing presentations. The quiet pride of building something real. Something mine. And suddenly, the idea of Ethan here, sleeping in this room, occupying this space, existing inside the life I had built, felt unbearable, not inconvenient, not uncomfortable, unacceptable. I stood up abruptly, walked back into the living room, picked up my phone, opened my contacts, scrolled down, stopped on one name, Millie, my best friend. We had met in college. She was studying law, sharp-minded, direct, unapologetic. She didn't tolerate manipulation. She didn't tolerate unfairness. And she had spent years watching my family take advantage of me. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Helen," she said. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then said the words I had never said before. I said quietly, "It's not." There was a pause. Then her voice changed, focused, serious. "What happened?" I told her everything, the dinner, the decision, the messages, the assumption. She didn't interrupt. She listened. And when I finished, she said something that stopped me completely. "They're not asking you," she said. "I know," I replied. "No," she said firmly. "You don't understand. This isn't a request. This is a takeover." The word hit me harder than anything else. Takeover. Because that's exactly what it was. "They think they have the right," she continued. "Because you've always said yes." I swallowed. She wasn't wrong. "They're counting on your guilt," she said. "Your history, your silence." My chest tightened. "What do I do?" I asked. There was a long pause, and when she spoke again her voice was calm, certain. "You stop reacting," she said. I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "you stop playing the role they assigned you." Her words lingered in the air, heavy, unavoidable. For 32 years, I had been predictable, reliable, compliant, safe, and they had built their expectations on that foundation. They believed I would never change, never resist, never leave, because I never had before. But sitting there, holding my phone, listening to Millie's steady breathing on the other end of the line. For the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I did. Not argue, not negotiate, not explain. Just stop cooperating, stop accommodating, stop being available. Because maybe the only way to protect what was mine was to remove it from their reach entirely. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet. But for the first time, the possibility existed. And once a possibility exists, it can become a decision. That afternoon, my phone kept buzzing. Calls, messages, voicemails. I ignored all of them. Not out of fear, out of choice. Each unanswered call felt like reclaiming something. Each ignored message felt like resistance. Not loud resistance, quiet resistance. The kind that grows stronger in silence. That night, I walked through my house slowly. Every room, every wall, every corner, seeing it differently now, not just as a home, but as leverage, as freedom, as something they believed they could control, but couldn't. Not unless I let them. And standing there, in the center of the life I had built, I made a realization that terrified me and liberated me at the same time. The only reason they had power over my home was because I still owned it. The next morning, I opened my laptop, stared at the property value estimate on the screen, and realized that with one decision, one signature, and one phone call, I could take away the one thing they believed they already owned, my house. And they would never see it coming. The decision they would never forgive. The number on the screen didn't feel real. I refreshed the page twice, just to be sure. It stayed the same. Estimated market value $412,000. I leaned back slowly in my chair, staring at the figure like it might vanish if I blinked. When I bought this house 4 years ago, it had cost the $285,000. At the time, that number had terrified me. It had represented everything I had saved, everything I had sacrificed, and everything I had risked. But now, it represented something else. Freedom. Not emotional freedom. Financial freedom. The kind that could turn an impossible decision into a practical one. I opened another tab and checked my remaining mortgage balance. $188,000. Which meant, if I sold, I would walk away with more than $200,000. My stomach tightened. Not with fear, with realization. For the first time since that dinner, I wasn't thinking about what I might lose. I was thinking about what I could gain. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Helen, This silence is childish. We need to act like adults and discuss Ethan's move. I didn't open it, didn't respond, didn't react. Instead, I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip. Because for the first time in my life, their urgency wasn't mine. Their timeline wasn't mine. Their expectations weren't mine. For years, I had lived as if their needs were my responsibility. But sitting there, looking at the numbers, I understood something clearly. I had options, real ones, and options meant control. I opened my contacts again, scrolled down, stopped at a name I hadn't thought about in months. Rachel Donovan, the real estate agent who had helped me buy the house. She had been efficient, professional, direct, everything I needed right now. My finger hovered over her number. This was the moment. The point where thinking turned into action. Once I made this call, nothing would be theoretical anymore. It would be real, permanent, irreversible. I pressed call. She answered quickly, "Helen, it's been a while. How are you?" I took a breath. "I'm thinking about selling," I said. There was a brief pause. Then her tone sharpened. "Selling? Already?" "Yes." Another pause. Then, "That's unexpected. May I ask why?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real. "I'm ready for something different," I said simply. She didn't question it. Good agents rarely do. "Well," she said, "the market is very strong right now. You'd likely sell quickly." Quickly, that word sent a strange calm through me. "How quickly?" I asked. "If priced correctly." "Weeks, maybe less." "Weeks. Not months, not years, weeks. Faster than my family could adapt, faster than they could interfere, faster than they could stop me." "I'd like to move forward," I said. There was no tremor in my voice, no hesitation, just certainty. "All right," she replied. "I'll run a full analysis and get back to you with a recommended price. We can start preparing immediately." Prepare. The word felt like armor. We ended the call, and just like that, everything had changed. Not visibly, not externally, but internally. Because now, I wasn't trapped, I was transitioning. I stood up and walked through the house again. But this time, I saw it differently. Not as a permanent structure, but as an asset. Something transferable, something liquid, something that could be converted into distance. Distance from expectations, distance from pressure, distance from them. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan." I stared at his name. Didn't answer. Didn't read the message. Because it didn't matter anymore. For the first time in our lives, his plans didn't include me, and mine didn't include him. The next few days passed in quiet motion. Rachel called back with her analysis. Her estimate was even higher than I'd expected. "If we position it correctly," she said, "you could receive multiple offers." "Multiple offers, multiple exits," she explained the process. Photography, listing, showings, negotiation, closing. Each step was clinical, logical, predictable. Everything my family wasn't. We scheduled the photographer, set the timeline, prepared the strategy, all without telling anyone. Because this wasn't a discussion, it was a decision. At the same time, the messages from my family continued. My mother alternated between guilt and irritation. "We're trying to help Ethan rebuild his life. You're being unreasonable." Family supports each other. Ethan's messages were shorter, more entitled. "When should I start moving stuff? Do you still have that desk? Answer your phone." Each message confirmed what I already knew. They weren't waiting for permission. They were waiting for compliance. But compliance wasn't coming, not this time. That weekend, I started packing. Not everything, just small things, personal things, documents, photos, memories, things I couldn't replace. I told myself it was preparation, not escape. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't preparation, it was departure. Each box I filled felt like reclaiming ownership, not just of my belongings, but of myself. I rented a small storage unit across town. No one knew about it. No one needed to. I moved items slowly, carefully, strategically, because secrecy wasn't paranoia, it was protection. Rachel called again 3 days later. The photos look incredible, she said. This house will sell fast. Sell. The word still felt unreal, but also right. For years, this house had represented independence. Now it represented liberation, not from the house, from what the house had become, a target, a resource, a solution to someone else's problems. I wasn't just selling property. I was removing access, removing leverage, removing expectations, and once it was gone, they would have nothing left to claim. That realization didn't make me sad. It made me calm, because calm meant certainty, and certainty meant strength. That night, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from my mother. I listened this time. "Helen," she said, her voice tight. "Your father and I don't understand why you're being like this. Ethan needs stability. You have stability. Why is this so difficult for you?" She paused, then added softly, "We raised you better than this." I stared at the phone long after the message ended. Raised me better than this. Better than independence. Better than boundaries. Better than ownership. Better than choice. For the first time, those words didn't make me feel small. They made me feel free. Because I finally understood something. They hadn't raised me to be strong. They had raised me to be useful. And useful things don't belong to themselves. But I did. Now, I did. Rachel called the next morning. "The listing goes live tomorrow," she said. Tomorrow, not someday, not eventually. Tomorrow. The process had begun. The house would be visible, available, transferable, and soon gone. I walked into the spare bedroom one last time, sat in the chair, looked around. This room had been my workspace, my refuge, my foundation, and now, it was something else. Proof. Proof that I could build something. And proof that I could walk away from it. Not because I failed, but because I chose to. And choice was the one thing my family had never expected me to use. 3 days after the listing went live, Rachel called with excitement in her voice. There was already an offer. Full price. No conditions. And suddenly, my escape wasn't a possibility anymore. It was a countdown. The quiet disappearance. When Rachel told me there was already an offer, I didn't react immediately. I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the wall across from my desk. It had only been 3 days. 3 days since the listing went live. 3 days since my house had quietly entered a marketplace my family didn't even know existed. "How serious are they?" I asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Very serious. Full asking price. No contingencies. They're pre-approved and ready to move quickly. Full asking price, no contingencies, no resistance." It felt unreal. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was happening so easily. For years, everything involving my family had been difficult, emotional, complicated, heavy. But this was clean, simple, transactional. "Do you want to accept?" Rachel asked gently. I looked around my office, at the desk where I had built my career, at the bookshelf filled with manuals, journals, and quiet proof of effort, at the walls that had witnessed every late night and early morning. This room had protected me. But now, it couldn't, not from them. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I accept." Rachel exhaled softly, like she had been holding her breath. "I'll prepare the paperwork immediately." Paperwork, signatures, deadlines. Each word moved me closer to something permanent. We ended the call, and I sat there for a long time afterward. Not grieving, not celebrating, just existing in the space between who I had been and who I was becoming. My phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't even look at it. Because whatever they were saying no longer mattered. They were planning a future that no longer existed. And they didn't even know it yet. Over the next week, everything moved quickly. Inspections were scheduled. Documents were drafted. Deadlines were set. I signed forms I had never imagined signing so soon. Each signature felt strange, not painful, not joyful, final, like closing a chapter I hadn't realized was ending. At the same time, I continued preparing in silence, packing more boxes, moving more belongings into storage, selling furniture online, not all at once, not in ways that would attract attention, slowly, carefully, strategically. Each empty space in the house felt like a secret, proof of a reality no one else could see. One evening, as I wrapped dishes in newspaper, my phone rang. My father. I stared at his name for a moment. He rarely called, not unless something was wrong. I answered. Helen, he said. His voice sounded cautious, measured. We haven't heard from you. I didn't respond immediately. He continued. Your mother is worried. Not I miss you. Not are you okay. Your mother is worried. About disruption. About inconvenience. About uncertainty. I've been busy. I said. It wasn't a lie. Just not the truth he expected. He hesitated, then asked the question he actually cared about. When is Ethan moving in? I closed my eyes briefly, not from guilt, from clarity, because he still believed it was inevitable, still believed my life was negotiable. I don't know, I said calmly. It wasn't technically false. He would never move in, but they didn't know that yet. Well, he said, we need to plan properly. Need. Always need. Never ask, never consider, just expect. I'll let you know, I replied. Then I ended the call, not abruptly, not angrily, just conclusively. The next morning, Rachel called again. Closing is scheduled for next Friday, she said. Friday, 10 days away. 10 days until everything changed. 10 days until my house wasn't mine anymore. 10 days until their assumptions collapsed. How are you feeling? She asked. I thought about it honestly. Calm, I said, and it was true. Not anxious, not conflicted. Calm, because uncertainty had been replaced with inevitability. The outcome was no longer hypothetical. It was scheduled. Over the next 10 days, I finished dismantling my life, not emotionally, physically, boxes, closets, drawers. Every object examined, every decision intentional. I kept only what mattered. Everything else was sold, donated, or discarded, because I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving a role. The reliable daughter, the supportive sister, the available solution. Each discarded item felt symbolic. Each empty shelf felt like progress. My phone continued buzzing with messages. My mother grew more impatient. We need answers, Helen. This delay is unnecessary. Ethan deserves stability. Deserves. The word lingered. For 32 years, everything had been about what Ethan deserved. Opportunity, support, protection, forgiveness. But no one had ever asked what I deserved, until now. And now, I was answering that question myself. Closing day arrived quietly. There was no ceremony, no announcement, no warning. Just a lawyer's office, a stack of documents, and a pen. The buyers were already there when I arrived. A young couple, nervous, excited, hopeful. They smiled at me like I was giving them something precious. They didn't know they were also giving something to me. Escape. The lawyer explained the paperwork. Page after page, signature after signature, each one irreversible, each one necessary. My hand remained steady, because this wasn't loss. It was transfer. Transfer of ownership, transfer of expectation, transfer of responsibility. With the final signature, it was done. The house was no longer mine. And for the first time in years, neither was the burden. The lawyer shook my hand. Congratulations, he said. The word felt strange, but accurate. I walked out into the sunlight, into open space, into a future no one else controlled. That afternoon, the money appeared in my account, 6 figures. Proof of independence, proof of completion, proof of choice. I didn't celebrate, I didn't tell anyone, I simply moved forward. The next day, I moved into my new apartment, smaller, simpler, safer, no spare bedrooms, no extra space, no availability, just enough, exactly enough, for me. That night, sitting on the unfamiliar couch, my phone buzzed again. My mother. I answered. Helen, she said, relieved. Finally. We need to confirm Ethan's move this weekend. I listened quietly. She continued talking, planning, assuming, believing. She had no idea. None of them did. Not yet. And for the first time in my life, I held the truth. And they didn't. That Sunday, I drove to their house for dinner. They thought I was finally ready to cooperate. They thought I was finally ready to surrender. They had no idea. I had already erased their plan completely. And in less than 5 minutes, their entire world would collapse. The signature that ended everything. Sunday dinner looked exactly the same as it always had. That was the strange part. Nothing about the house had changed. The driveway was still cracked in the same places. The porch light still flickered faintly before stabilizing. The curtains in the front window were still the same pale beige my mother had chosen years ago, back when she still believed she could control everything inside those walls. Inside, the smell of roasted meat and vegetables filled the air, familiar, comforting, deceptive, because beneath that normalcy, everything had already changed. They just didn't know it yet. I stepped inside without knocking. I never knocked. This had always been a place I was expected to belong, whether I wanted to or not. My mother appeared from the kitchen almost immediately. Her face lit up with relief when she saw me. There you are, she said, her voice warm but edged with something else. Expectation, not happiness, validation. She believed I had come back to accept their decision. She believed she had won. We were beginning to think you were avoiding us, she added lightly. Avoiding. Such a small word for something so much bigger. I've been busy, I said calmly. She studied my face, searching for signs of resistance. She didn't find any. Because resistance wasn't necessary anymore. Ethan was in the living room, stretched across the couch like he owned it. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting into a smug half-smile. Well, he said casually, about time. About time. As if my compliance had been inevitable. As if my life had simply been paused until I returned to it. My father sat in his usual chair, newspaper folded neatly in his lap. He nodded once when he saw me, acknowledging my presence like it was a delayed appointment finally kept. No one asked how I was. No one asked why I had been silent. Because none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was whether I would obey. We sat down at the dining table. The same table where they had first informed me Ethan would be moving into my house. The same table where they had assumed control over something that had never belonged to them. Dinner began normally. Small talk, surface, level conversation. My mother describing something she'd seen on television. My father mentioning a neighbor's new car. Ethan scrolling through his phone, barely listening. They were waiting. Waiting for the moment when I would finally confirm what they already believed. It didn't take long. My mother set down her fork and looked directly at me. So, she said, her tone careful but firm. We need to finalize Ethan's move. There it was, not a question, a declaration. I nodded slightly. I understand, I said. Her shoulders relaxed immediately. Ethan leaned back in his chair, satisfied. They thought this was the beginning of my surrender. It was actually the end of their control. We were thinking next weekend, she continued. Your father can help move his things. I let her finish, let her outline the plan, let her build expectations. Then I spoke. There's something you should know, I said quietly. They all looked at me. My father frowned slightly. Ethan's smile faded, replaced by mild annoyance at the interruption. My mother's expression tightened. What is it? She asked. I met her eyes and told her the truth. I sold the house. Silence. Not confusion, not disbelief. Silence. The kind that exists when reality hasn't caught up yet. My mother blinked. Once, twice. What? She said. I sold it? I repeated calmly. The words landed like gravity, heavy, unavoidable, permanent. My father straightened in his chair. Ethan leaned forward. My mother laughed nervously. That's not funny, Helen. I'm not joking. Her laughter stopped. Her face changed, shifted, cracked. You can't have, she said. But she already knew. She already understood. Because something in my voice told her this wasn't rebellion. It was conclusion. The closing was on Friday. I continued. The new owners take possession tomorrow. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was explosive. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You sold your house, she demanded. Les, her voice rose. Without telling us. There it was, not concern, not curiosity, ownership, the belief that my decisions required their approval. It was my house. I said simply. Ethan stood up next. You're serious? He asked. Les. His face flushed with anger. Where am I supposed to go? The question hung in the air, not because it was my responsibility, but because he believed it was. I didn't answer immediately, because for once, the answer wasn't mine to provide. My mother spoke again, her voice sharp with accusation. You did this on purpose. Yes, I had, but not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. You left us with no choice, she continued. I almost laughed, because they had never believed I had a choice. You made your position clear, I said calmly. So I made mine. My father finally spoke. Where are you living? He asked. Not because he cared, because he wanted to restore order, control, access. I have an apartment, I said. My mother stared at me. Where? I shook my head. I'm not sharing that. Her expression hardened. We're your family. The word family felt different now. Smaller, less powerful, yes, I said. You are. But family wasn't ownership. Family wasn't obligation. Family wasn't entitlement. And for the first time in my life, I understood that completely. Ethan scoffed. This is unbelievable. Yes, it was. Because for once, I had done something they never expected. I had chosen myself. My mother's voice softened suddenly. Manipulation, shifting tactics. You're being selfish, she said quietly. Selfish. The word they had trained me to fear. The word that had controlled me for decades. But now, it didn't hurt. Because I understood something they didn't. Selfishness wasn't always wrong. Sometimes, it was survival. I'm being independent, I corrected gently. Her eyes filled with anger. And something else. Fear. Because independence was the one thing they had never prepared for. I stood up. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just deliberately. I should go, I said. No one stopped me. Because they didn't know how. They had never prepared for a version of me that didn't need their permission. I walked to the door, opened it, paused. Not because I doubted myself. Because I wanted to remember this moment. The moment everything changed. Behind me, the silence was absolute. In front of me, the world was open. I stepped outside, closed the door, and didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, my phone stayed quiet. No calls, no messages, no attempts to regain control. Because they couldn't. Not anymore. My new apartment became something my house had never fully been. Mine. Completely. Without expectation. Without intrusion. Without obligation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't supporting someone else's future. I was living my own. And the strangest part was, I didn't feel loss. I felt relief. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is sign your name and walk away.